A lot of excitement around Saudi Arabia, and I want to hear what you think about the potential there, and also put it in context for us in the wider region, because it's not just a Saudi story, is it, for you?
No, it's true. It's the wider region that is really attracting interest from banks, international banks like ourselves. And as you said, we've been running a 5-year growth plan, which is very ambitious, which basically is around 4 specific pillars, which is increasing the footprint in terms of clients, investing the balance sheet, because this is a region that is a pay-to-play model, so you have to show the commitment. Stepping up the dialogue with the decision makers, and this is a region where the governments are still running a big chunk of the economy, and very importantly, bringing the expertise. And this is what we've been doing over the past 4 years. Within that, UAE is our base, and I still believe UAE is the most professional, the most mature market for banks to play. But Saudi, as you mentioned, is the largest economy and is the largest potential, and that's how we're seeing it, and that's where also we're implementing that strategy very actively at the moment.
And obviously that 5-year strategy, I think that the last time we chatted to you guys, it was you're well ahead of strategy. You talk about hiring in the markets team, boosting the Islamic finance. Where are you hiring? How aggressively are you hiring? And how's the market down here? Because the audience for this particular show would be interested in that, in the answer to that question.
Sure. Well, I'm very happy to actually break the news here. We are going to announce a series of hirings that we've just done in the areas where we as a bank believe we fit in the region. And I'm talking about structured financing, financing large projects, advising large projects, export finance, debt capital markets.
How many people?
In total 6 that we are going to announce soon, and that includes 2 on the market side. As you know, Societe Generale is a derivatives house, so we're going to step up our game in terms of attracting more of the flows, especially on the fixed income side, from FIs and from corporates. Importantly, what we're doing is we're dedicating specialized resources to some client segments, especially the sovereigns. Okay. And that is the big thing, I think, in the market, because since the end of 2015, sovereigns have engaged into a much more active dialogue with international banks, because they need both the financial capital but also the intellectual capital. And what I mean by intellectual capital is international banks who have the capacity to bring their international experience at a time where those countries are going through a very steep transformation plan.
Richad, in terms of the issuers in this part of the world, and we've put a graphic together that really showcases who's been the top issuers, and in 2017, Saudi Arabia featuring prominently on that front. You have not been featured in the top 5 of advisors or managers of those particular issuers. How is that going to change in 2018? How do you get up to the top 10 players in this space?
Well, you're right. We haven't been there in the first couple of issues. We've been in other places, and you've seen us leading, for instance, the Oman jumbo bond last year. This will change, and you know, we do tend to invest progressively, and we have reached a level of dialogue with the Saudi government that allows us to be more optimistic for the future. Again, Saudi is the next big thing for us, so you will see us much more around very large Saudi Arabia transactions this year, for sure.
Well, there's one man who already has his arms wrapped around Goldman Sachs. That's Mohammed bin Salman. I mean, we had this tweet last week from Lloyd Blankfein. I thought it was quite funny. But in terms of those relationships and in terms of building those relationships, you talk about Saudi. But in terms of the bond market issuance, we've had this shift, haven't we? We've had this shift from syndicated loans towards the bond market. Is that going to continue? Because we cover these issuances every time they come. Is that what are we going to see that trend continue in the market?
I think we will see 2 things. We will see that trend continue because the bank market and so the syndicated market and the bond market will have to support regional economies going forward, because we know that those deficits will have to be plugged on a long-term basis. But what I think we will see more and more is the capacity for these governments to go to alternative ways of financing as well.
Okay.
What I mean by that is, for instance, ECAs, export credit agencies, are stepping up more and more into the regional financial needs. One of my favorite markets here is Egypt.
Yeah.
And I'm not only saying that because I'm in front of you, Youssef, but...
You're playing to the gallery now. He's trying to get you on side. This is the point.
But Egypt, you know, because it has this risk profile that is still quite difficult for investors and banks, has been supported by export credit agencies very big time. Yeah. We're advising the largest petrochem project in Egypt called Taria Petrochemical, and this is a 10 billion project that will represent a big chunk of the exports of the country. And this project will be financed almost entirely by a range of European and American export credit agencies.
Let's talk a little bit about loan growth. Average in the GCC for 2017 was about 3%. Has it been any higher or lower for you? And what's your outlook for 2018? Where does that go from here?
You mean loans overall?
Yes.
Or okay. Well, yes, it is growing, and again, the governments are very much leading that trend. So I see that continue to grow. It is the case for us. I mean, as part of our plan, we have already multiplied by 2 our exposure to the region, and we are ready to continue to do that. And governments will be a big chunk of it for us as well, although as part of our expansion, we're also looking at the private sector, because the private sector will become key for those countries as part of the transformation plans. And we have to make sure we are close to the private sector players who will lead the way in these different countries.
Youssef and I were in Abu Dhabi just a couple of weeks ago, and we spent a day with FAB, that big announcement that was made last year in terms of consolidation. I suppose the question is, from your perspective as you go around, are we going to see more bank consolidation in the region? Not necessarily from you, but as a theme in the region to look at more movement. Do you think there's an appetite for consolidation in terms of the sector?
Well, I think there's a rationale for that. I don't know if there's an appetite, but as part of the government's, moving ahead in rationalizing their own different holdings, governments do own a certain number of very large banks in these different countries. Therefore, what we've seen with FAB is a pattern that we can see, well, in the UAE to start with, again, or in other countries. Now, whether that's going to happen now or later, I don't know. Whether that's going to happen at all,
would you buy assets? Would you buy back? I mean, you're hiring people. So my question to you is, would you buy any wealth management business? How do you play into that story, if at all?
Well, we have a very focused approach, and our model, we're very happy with the model we have. So this is the model that we will continue, meaning organic growth and selective growth. Selective growth by hiring the right expertise. And the one thing about us is that we don't pretend we're everything to everyone. We're a multi-specialist corporate investment bank. So basically, we know we have strengths. And guess what? Those strengths, global strengths, are very much adapted to the region, and we're going to continue to invest in those specific strengths. Yeah.
Very quickly, we ask this question pretty much to everybody who sits on this set. If you're a betting man, Saudi Aramco IPO, does it happen in 2018 or 2019?
What proportion of fees are you going to get out of it? That's more important to me.
Well, my personal bet is probably 18 or 19.
Okay, well, do you think from a market perspective they've got to go in 18?
I think we are at a stage where it's more and more difficult to see this happening by the end of 2018, because again, it's the largest IPO ever. You have to engage with the investor base. I'm happy to hear that the government is sticking to their plans, and I hope that this is what can be delivered. But to be honest, it doesn't really make a difference if it's 18 or the first half of 19. So let's see. What is important is that international investors are given a chance to have a piece of this this thing that is basically a proxy for Saudi Arabia and the wealth of Saudi Arabia.
We will squeeze one very last one out. He was in Saudi last week. He spoke to the Generale CEO, etc. Is that a step change for us? Is that important in this IPO story, the change of the Tadawul in terms of the MSCI position, the FTSE Russell, what we're seeing there?
Of course, it's a very important stepping stone, the same as what has been announced about the government debt. I think this is all about putting the Tadawul at the international standards, creating the transparency and the governance, which is what investors are requesting. So I think the Saudi leadership is really making the right moves in terms of preparing the ground for something big like Aramco.